himself with the brush of black magic. But keep this as clearly as possible.
Okay, I'm working on another, what will likely be a watercolor, but I'm going to see how far I can get just using the 0.5. And it's something I made in Bing, so it's not really original, it's generic. But I like the results I've been getting. Let me go ahead and show you at the outset. Maybe I can keep it in screen. This is what I'm working on. I'll see if I can keep it in the same frame. For now, because once I start using watercolor, that's the direction I go. I'll have to relocate the computer. I'm checking out an audiobook from something that came out in 1978. It's called The Book of Results. And it's this author talking about the theory in or behind sigil magic. And he references the Dianetic model of the mind and engrams. And this book, the audiobook again, is called The Book of Results by Ray Sherwin. And he's suggesting that their concept of engrams is real, that in moments of unconsciousness, what he calls what L. Ron Hubbard called the reactive mind, is a passive recipient of programming. That's what engrams are, like inner bits of programming that are acquired unconsciously. And many are planted there. That would be the point of going through Dianetics, to find out what's in your head. But the theory here is that these things can be activated. So it's not just like, it's sort of like a post-hypnotic suggestion, but until it's deprogrammed, until it's revealed, it will always be an influence over that person's life. And moreover, it describes how these things are acquired through certain means, specifically, accidents, moments of unconsciousness. This is why Scientology is so against drugs, because it would leave you susceptible to this. But it's interesting because it would seem that our entire media ecosystem is designed to infect us with which are, again, these are worse than post-hypnotic suggestions. That's why MK Ultra. And I think there might be something to it. But more interestingly here is that this book is about sigil magic, and it's from 1978. It goes over the work of Osmond Spare. And their whole system of magic is how to get programs, how to get the spell into the subconscious, how to bypass the filter of awareness, how to suspend disbelief. So the practices of magic involve a sort of what I call sleight of mind. The whole theory behind it is tricking oneself. And that's why it's so interesting to me that there's so many of these gods of magic that are based on the planet, or that are attributed to the planet Mercury. And they have qualities that are considered to be mercurial, tricky. So the tricky nature of it all, which I think also relates to the nature of the subconscious and puns and the illogic, or the dream world logic, surreality. But I'm listening to this in the context of media, and if there's anything to it. Because I'm in the process of demystifying. And we'll talk about this later today. I'm still getting, I won't say pushback, but we've offered a bit of a challenge to the synchromysticism model to explain mass media coincidences. And I believe that we've brought forth something that has better explanatory value, which is not asserting a higher power, but rather man manipulating man through highly sophisticated means that just aren't obvious. But I'm in the subreddit for No Politics, and the consensus there is that no, man couldn't possibly do all this. It's a higher power. There's the universe is projecting a pattern through media. And it's an interesting argument because what it's positing is that mass media is divinely inspired and that you're able to witness literal evidence of God affecting human affairs. The Bible can't even do that for most people, but the TV can do it for the synchromystics. Like The Simpsons predicting 9/11 is some kind of message from God? I don't think so. But the synchromystic explanation leads to one thing: simulation theory. And that's the major, I think this is the final guardrail. The final guardrail is anybody who figures out that simulations, as in simulated events on the news, can create a map of the world that is largely a simulation, like an alternate reality game, like role-playing. That's why we use the word LARP, the acronym LARP, live action role-playing. But instead of having you recognize that you've been dragged into a big LARP, where a lot of the things you react to are simply constructs, instead, you're steered into the explanation that you have seen the work of God, that you are now in a position through analyzing media with your level of awareness, you're able to see that this is a higher power at work. Man couldn't do this. I love it when people say that. Has to be an alien. But they can't say specifically which God did it. Which deity are you attributing it to? Like, why would God be so, I don't know, maybe the word is trivial or petty, but yeah, God's going to intervene, not to stop the fireman from getting shot behind Trump, but he's going to intervene to throw in some hints about the upcoming shooting in the form of movie trailers and season finale TV shows that millions of people are watching. Like, no, it's so integrated, the predictive programming and the result news events, that if you're going to say the universe is doing this, and I've said this before, your conclusion must therefore be that the universe is a liberal Democrat that is simply hyping up future fake news events. Like, that doesn't make sense. As a model, it doesn't explain it. And ever since we moved into concurrent programming analysis, we have further distance ourselves from that false explanation. Concurrent programming is really proof positive that predictive programming and the real-time alignment is part of what media is. So simply put, mass media is creating a map of the world for you to internalize that is something the power elite want you to internalize, and not necessarily a reflection of what is. Like, yeah, TV lies. And many of the people who are part of it don't even know it. You know, that's one of the big tricks here, though. When people buy into a worldview and they base everything on that, they're in a closed system. And closed system media, you know, is non-skeptical media. It's media with a preordained conclusion. They're writing our history in advance. To me, this is one of the most fascinating things that we've come across since we've started talking about this years ago. We have determined, and we have evidence, that they write the news in advance when it comes to transformative historic events, and that our history is written in advance. Like, to me, this should be considered to be one of the more interesting developments, because we can actually expose that, yeah, there is a conspiracy. And when Matt Walsh was talking to Joe Rogan, because Joe Rogan went 180 again, so he's back to moon landing's fake. They were talking about they were talking about the Apollo 11, of course, and Joe Rogan's completely gone the other way. But I just kind of got the impression that this is a controlled release, because they recognize that a lot of people's worldviews are expanding, and they just have to put a limiter on that. So you can say the moon landing was fake, but space is still real, and they had to fake it to trick the Russians. Till says, Tim, they just announced they're reopening 3 Mile Island, and Microsoft will be the energy. WWE has a character named Adam Bomb, and he was from 3 Mile Island. Yeah, we got to look back to last year, too. No, 2 years ago, there was something happening where there's a hockey player named Adam who had his throat slashed. this like splitting of atom. This was last summer actually. But then we had that, there's a few things. There was Black Adam, that movie. There's a few things that I think we have to look back at here, predictive programming wise. All this atom bomb stuff, like finding out that Fallout references A Boy and His Dog had me look into that movie, and it's set in 2024. And I do think that the 917 reference in Leave the World Behind did come true with the exploding phones, the exploding pagers. Now, I'm looking at people react to that because people are mad about it because it's terrorism and it's Israel, but it's fake. I mean, unless you know something I don't, like, can somebody prove those things to be real? A lot of the atrocity propaganda is really just press releases. It's press releases. And it's easier than ever to fake stuff. What's interesting to me, though, to watch and observe is how people respond, the people who believe it's real, because you can find out who among us are psychopaths, sociopaths, and it's like a high percentage, actually. And it's a byproduct of the cult that we're in. I'm in day 2 of a conversation with this glurf on Twitter. He's so mad that we're calling these astronauts cosplayers, that we're going in a back and forth sharing clips. Like, oh, why does this astronaut have a bulging vein on his forehead? Where, you know, clearly he's upside down. And they're trying to really pin me down on this. Like, well, the wires don't explain this, so what could it be? It's like, it's not up to me to explain it. I can go watch David Copperfield. And if I can't figure out how he did every trick, do I have to say, I guess it was magic? No. They use this either or fallacy where you must be able to totally prove it, or we're right, or it must be a great work of, they're just breaking it down into this kind of a misrepresentation of what I'm saying, because I'm not saying that it's a magic trick because I can totally expose how it works, but I'm calling it a magic trick because magic tricks are simulations. They simulate something. They simulate the violation of the law of physics. But in order to declare it a magic trick based on glitches or apparent uses of harnesses, it doesn't require me to have a full explanation because I'm not there. But the burden of proof can be shifted. And I find that when I shift the burden of proof, like, hey, look, there's some kind of trickery going on here, what I find with a lot of these individuals is they mentally lock up. They get very defensive and insecure. And so this individual I've been debating with, as we're looking at this one clip, I find there's this black dot above the astronaut's head. And it's moving back and forth within a range. And so I show him this clip. And he's like, there's nothing there. I'm like, well, no, look. And I show him some screen caps from 24 minutes to 25 minutes. And he says, yeah, it's just a dot. Now, you can't say it's just a dot. It is an anomalous dot because in decades of moving around. But his attacking what I presented as evidence that this was hoaxery was to say that it was moving around like you would expect an object to be moving around in space. So he acknowledges there's an object, and he claims that it backs his proposition that they're in space. But what I was showing was that this object, over the course of the 41 minutes, moved within a range, as in it had a range limiter, like a screen, like a pendulum. So then we get into a debate about the meaning of pendulum, and I'm like, I don't have to be able to explain why this effect is a glitch. And I'm not asserting that every astronaut on the ISS is upside down and underwater. It's almost like they turn their intelligence down in order to not understand what you're really saying. Every single effect you see on the ISS is adequately explained in the back behind the scenes section of Inception, where they have a rotating stage. And what they did in Inception, which was genius, is they simulated 0G with very little CGI, none, and no wires. Like, we don't have to assume these guys are hanging from wires. They could have some kind of thing they're wearing beneath their clothes that attaches them to like a teeter-totter. It's like a pole, and it has a counterbalance. So there are so many ways they could be fake in space. We don't have to say, oh, well, If we can't prove they're hanging from wires, we must therefore agree that they're floating in outer space. No, that's ridiculous. And if that's your argument, I can't explain it, we must accept it. Well, I don't know. I didn't see any wires at the Video Music Awards, so Kate Perry was in space because she was doing some zero-G-like stuff. No, there are so many special effects that... And another thing, if I was able to go to a magician show and explain everything, he wouldn't have a show. They operate with a great deal of secrecy. Like, they assume everything has to be obvious. It wouldn't be obvious, especially when you're dealing with liars. And when it comes to this, the idea of a magic show, yeah, secrecy is intrinsic to it, and this has always been the case. We're talking about security clearances. I think one of the reasons why we have such bad special effects is there's a very limited and small number of people involved versus the private sector where you can draw from the Screen Actors Guild and all kinds of talented people. But no, you're just doing science fiction simulations for the government workers. It's not like they're drawing from the right talent pool is what I'm saying. They're reopening 3 Mile Island to have enough power. Oh yeah, so the 3 Mile Island thing, that came up earlier. We'll have to dig into that. There was something we talked about recently. Now, what's up with this P Daddy thing? Or P Diddy? Is this another Epstein nothing burger? You have right-wing conspiracy theorists sharing fan fiction. So I've been looking, too, at the movie Bad Monkey because of all the Monkey God and other... I think, there's a video game, a few movies, Monkey Man, etc., the Rage Virus stuff. I was looking at this, watching this series, and I'm still watching it. And it's a comedy, I guess, with Vince Vaughn. But one of the main themes is voodoo. And this angry voodoo priestess. And I'm thinking, this might tie into the Haitian thing. Because I just saw some politician, some state rep or something, really mad at Trump and Vance for what they've been saying about Haitians and cats. But I think there might be a story emerging here, a Bad Monkey tie-in. I'm still looking at it. And then someone reminded me, too, that Keanu Reeves in The Devil's Advocate had to defend a voodoo practitioner in court who was practicing animal sacrifice. And speaking of, voodoo and animal sacrifice, on his speaking tour, Tucker Carlson said that witches are coming over the border. He said that in Haiti, 5% of the population practice witchcraft. He said we're getting 5% of a population that practices witchcraft. So they're bringing back this satanic panic, or at least they're trying. Elephant Toss says, there's some connection to the cat being the new bats of 2020. Oh, there's something with that too. The cat thing. But I'm also noting too that there's additional and more ridiculous and obvious blowback about Musk owning Twitter and the effect that Twitter is having on the population, mind viruses, people who are susceptible to it. So we haven't seen the end of this agenda, but my contention has been that Musk is a fall guy for free speech. Free speech absolutism. But people are so deceived. There's and our purpose here has mainly been a philosophical approach rather than ideological. IPS freak off, says Elephant Tusks. Yeah. I think they already have those. Like, I think the entire like Flat Earth Conference group that we met, the ones that were all part of the original organization, it seems like, I don't know, like a lot of Trutherville, it seems like it's not just the music industry, it's not just politics. I think it's everywhere. Compromised people. Crisis actors are likely scum. A lot of truthers happen to be scum on parole. You know how many feds have how many people have been bankrolled by feds to push propaganda online? And one of the great tricks has been to convince truthers that propaganda is only mainstream. It's like, no, alt media is propaganda just as much, because they know that they don't have a one-size-fits-all explanation. So they have to get the other markets. They have to get the alternative. By the way, The Atlantic has a cover that's got the word martyr with Trump. And The Atlantic has been a very consistent predictor of Trump. Kevin Morgan says Joker comes out, yeah, October 4th. Now, 10/4 has a lot of interesting meaning in this whole big story. But remember, here's one of the big ones, is Joker 2 was being filmed outside of the courthouse on 4/4/23. And people driving by thought that the crowd was calling for Trump, this mob. So no, the angry mob was calling for Joker. And it was from a movie. So they actually merged the movie with reality. And people were confused. Bystanders were confused. But it was a mob scene. And this was on 4/4 Holy Week. And this was on Heath Ledger's 44th birthday. And now we have the new Joker. And Joker 2, which has a connotation of second coming. And in the first one, I can go over this later, all kinds of Christ and Burning Man symbolism attached to Joker. But you have Joker 2, the Heath Ledger and the 4/4 date, that's all tied into this as well, considering that 4/4 was the 55th anniversary of MLK's assassination. And it's Holy Week, where Trump had been Christified. So you have the martyr stuff, MLK, martyr, Christ, martyr. Heath Ledger's death day ties into this. And then you have this Joker 2 movie being filmed outside. So now we're watching the release of Joker 2 on 10/4. We have Beetlejuice 2, and I've already connected the archetypes here. The green hair, the black and the white shirt. You have Beetlejuice 2, Joker 2, similar archetypes. And then you have the second shooter, that Ryan Routh guy, to follow the Thomas Crooks. And your second shooter has all the Joker symbolism attached to him. Laughing in court, laughing when he's arrested. His hair is yellow and blue. Of course, that gets you your green. And then we find that Thomas Crooks looks like a young Riddler. And Thomas Crooks has been called by multiple news companies, from The Onion and a few other articles about him, Washington Examiner, I think they all called him an enigma. And Enigma is the name of the Riddler, Edward Nigma. My point being, they've merged the Batman universe with real-time political psyops, and this is nothing new to us here. So it's notable, too, that Trump's going to Aurora. I'm not sure when, but soon. Oh, another thing, this was pointed out last night in chat. Michael Keaton was Batman. So Beetlejuice, the second one, Joker 2, same archetype, and he was also Batman, one of his previous roles. And Batman is a very dualistic character. We're talking about the public face and then the other aspect of him. We were talking about this last night, and we played a clip from episode 33 of the original Batman series, episode from 1966, Fine Finney Friends, where it's revealed that Batman's great-grandfather founded the Skull and Bones Society. What's up? Osher brought in a box of wrenches. Portal Complex, Enslaved by Truth, They Lie We See, Evolvement, Observing Reality have all been blessed with the blue wrench. Abuse the power responsibly. I'm doing a pen sketch over a pencil outline, but it's going to be painted in watercolor, and that comes next. And then we'll be live. We have a lot to talk about. Yeah, like fight, fight, fight. Yeah, another one too. Thanks, Elephant Tusks. Dzhokhar Sarnev. Now, Dzhokhar Sarnev, and they called him Joker. They in fact called him Joker on the cover of like Rolling Stone or something. They mentioned that was his nickname. So you have Joker, the mad Boston bomber. Didn't that happen at 666 Boylan Street or something? Kind of a side note. But his death penalty was reinstated on 3/4/2022. So the Joker's death penalty was reinstated the day the new Batman movie came out. I started watching The Penguin last night. I watched the first episode or most of it, and I'll probably continue. It's exceptionally well done, and it's kind of, in a way, I think it follows in where the Batman movie takes off. But I'm just getting started. But it's extremely well written. I mean, it's really interesting. I don't want to offer any spoilers on it, but there's going to be predictive programming and concurrent programming in it. And something about the Joker movie, I haven't even talked about it yet, is the Lady Gaga being involved in it. What is the significance there? Or the significance of Joaquin Phoenix being in Napoleon, which opens up with the beheading of Marie Antoinette, which was already referenced in the opening of the Paris Olympics. And then, of course, Joaquin Phoenix has the Joker connection, but Napoleon has some interesting connections to the Trump story and Apollyon and the whole destroyer narrative we've been talking about. Now, there's a song called Revenge at the beginning of the Leave the World Behind, and the music video has someone shooting a transformer and a blackout happening. Like, a lot of this predictive programming seems like its timing is about right. And 10/4 does seem like an interesting date. I don't see that date as like the day something big happens necessarily, but there's just no way a movie like that comes out without something following it, as has been the case consistently every single time. That's why I was pointing out the Dzhokhar Sarnev thing. And these movies are beyond prescient. I mean, it's obviously preparing you for scripted future events. The fact that the Batman movie had a flooding of the election, and the slogan for the GOP was "Flood the polls." Okay, time to work with the watercolor. Yeah, that's another thing too. He's going over to Aurora, Colorado, and the truthers were inundated with this propaganda that somehow the Hells Angels were going to go over there to stop the Venezuelans from taking over apartments. Well, that whole story of Venezuelan taking the jobs of American gangs, that's all fake. This is a hoax, right before the cat thing with Ohio. So between Ohio and Aurora, you have these epicenters for these basically psyops targeting Trutherville. What's strange about this Epstein stuff and the Puffy stuff, and by the way, Puffy's staying with Frank James and R. Kelly, Sam Bankman. You know how like rappers go to jail and they release an album? Like sometimes I look at these things and I'm like, are these guys really in jail, or do they just dress up the recording studio to look like that and they're all faking it because it gives them cred, street cred? For me, it's still pics or it didn't happen. I don't believe the cat eating story, and the only pics we get are after the fact revealed to be chickens, and the dogs are all sheep. So until I see pictures, I'm not going to believe it. I'm not going to spread rumors about Puff Daddy and all these allegations. The stuff about Andrew Tate doesn't have to be true for him to still be a psychopath, though. The guy's teaching people how to start their own grooming gangs. It's pretty creepy. But I also think he's fake because he's basically the star of Speak No Evil that just came out on Friday the 13th. It's like after the movie comes out, the director's like, yeah, this is based on Andrew Tate, and I had no idea Tate was about to be arrested for all these bad things. So in the movie, they're presenting this villain, this, paragon of toxic masculinity. Yeah, was Joe Biggs really in jail? Hell no. Joe Biggs is highly questionable. He even claims that he knew somebody who was in the hospital from the Vegas shooting, the Harvest Festival. Remember when Jason Aldean was 33 and they played some sound effects of the speakers and people ran and then crisis actors acted? One of my favorite scenes was when these 3 actresses get into the back of an Uber or a cab and they're like, yeah, we've been shot. She's been shot in the leg. And the Uber driver's like, well, I'll take you to the hospital. And then the girl's like, no, we'll be okay. Just take me to the hotel. Which one? Take us to a really nice one. Like she's shot in the leg and bleeding in the back of the car. No, not a consideration. Let's just get into a nice hotel. And that's because they were LARPing. A lot of the victims at Vegas were flown in from California. Good gig. That's why, you get into it. 50 of the people show up again at another shooting. We hear about this time and time again. Like this guy dodged a bullet here and he died here, or he knew somebody here. But 50 people having 2 different mass shooting events with barely a year apart. You have to be a fool or just apathetic to the truth, fact averse, or just not care to agree with these narratives or to believe or defend them. I can understand being apathetic, but if you're defending these narratives, there's something wrong with you. Media advocates. Like, no, the media would never lie. People don't lie on TV. Like, there's no virtue in parading around your naivety or gullibility. It's actually shameful. That's why I have a little more respect for Joe Rogan now, because his reasons for not believing the moon landing stem from a healthy level of skepticism, and he's more or less agnostic about it. He knows the limit of what he knows and how far he can claim, and he's gone pretty much as far as he's allowed to go. And it doesn't have to, you don't have to say, that the earth is flat. That's not the conclusion that I'm promoting. I'm just saying it's a valid question. What does the world look like if the pictures that were given of it are all fake? But yeah, Joe Biggs is 100% a hoax. A hoax monger. Makes me question his war hero stories. Because I remember when he was introduced to InfoWars, Alex Jones was asking him some questions about this IED, and he was part of some operation, and supposedly he saw some action. And looking now at his role in January 6th, I think he was drafted into the PSYOP entertainment complex, which we should talk about. A lot of people talk about the military-industrial complex, which is a meaningless phrase now. And not enough are talking about the PSYOP entertainment complex. The actors, the metascriptors, the writers, the insiders at whatever level that they're allowed into. One of the things that the Conspiracy No Politics subreddit was talking about was how it's too big. There's too many people to be a part of it. There's no way. And that's a lazy take, and we'll analyze this in detail today, but There are people at various levels of in the know when it comes to these various psyops, as you would expect. That's why you see the same faces, the same agencies. It's like there are insiders to the psy war. They're just not all let in all the way. And we can, talk about the various facets, like the people who are involved in faking school shootings, for example. What would they have to be informed of, just to be involved in something like that? Well, these events aren't in isolation, and they're not mere hoaxes. That term really understates it, because we're talking about events that involve local media, national media, police, fire departments, military, governors. Like, these things are top down. And I think that it's an error to overemphasize all kinds of like truth or orthodoxies and things that they always debate upon. Like, for example, there are people who are still mad about 9/11 or still talking about Sandy Hook. It's like, who cares? You have 50 other events, and every one of these has the same structure, but they focus on the big flashy ones with the falling buildings. But the same infrastructure is used to enact smaller psyops, smaller scale events. They all require the existence of the psyop entertainment complex. And there is such a thing. One of the things that Matt Walsh had said was that he wouldn't believe in the moon landing as a hoax unless Elon Musk said so, or if he was shown some evidence that a hoax was being conducted, like documents, somebody admitting it somewhere, or whistleblower. Well, we have evidence. You can look at predictive and concurrent programming as evidence of manipulated news events, simulated news events, PR stunts. I mean, we're not psychic, we're not prophets, but we're consistently right. And there's a reason why. And I'm not going to buy that the movie Machete with Robert De Niro was an act of God, and it's just a coincidence by God that his speech mirrored Trump's future speech with all these other seeming synchronistic overlaps. And these things are synchronized, but it's not synchronicity in the sense of it being the result of some kind of cosmic interference from coincidence, the idea of like coincidence being the result of an intelligent creator or being somehow, a demiurge, or AI is what they often default to. No, we have every reason to point to human directors who are part of this psyop entertainment complex. Like I just brought up James Cameron. He's filming Ghosts of Hiroshima. Ghosts of Hiroshima documentary. Well, he was filming Ghosts in the Abyss about the Titanic on 9/11. So there's this repeated theme with this guy. And so this is predictive of, I would say, this incoming Oppenheimer event. But James Cameron, just to name one of these directors, has been involved in so many of these events that you can't just say he's an instrument of a higher power or God's working through James Cameron. Like James Cameron is inspired by a higher power to put messages that just somehow prophesize the future. Like that's an argument for media being divinely inspired. That's mystifying it. It's very culty. And it's the wrong explanation, and I could not be satisfied with that. If I thought that was true, if I thought it was true that all these instances of predictive programming were the result of a higher power, my whole focus would be spiritual. I'd be like, hey, look, we're getting messages from God, from Netflix. And I would probably lose my mind. One more argument against that whole concept that God or the universe is doing predictive programming. Explain to me why God is only predicting future fake events that are meant to deceive people. Like, that's kind of weird. Like, what God are you talking about? Some kind of God of psyops? A God that does a God that manipulates our media for the purposes of helping statism and collectivism and all sorts of bad ideas. Like, it really falls apart. And that's why I notice that synchromystics are very vague. They never name their God. Like, yeah, sometimes Jesus sits in on these script writing sessions at The Simpsons. It just throws a few Easter eggs in there for those of us who are paying attention so we know what's coming. No, I don't think so. And again, we'll talk about this in detail later. This isn't me nitpicking at some people being wrong. Like, billions of people are wrong about the moon, about a lot of things. I don't care. I think it's a deliberate effort to sabotage the truth. You want to prevent people from noticing that mass media presents a simulated worldview, a simulation of the world that they can mess with, like the programmers at Westworld, or like the gods in Clash of the Titans, like this model that the elite are around in Hunger Games. They just manipulate the world from above. And isn't that what we're talking about? We're talking about man manipulating man through propaganda. And if we can look at it as, if we can look at religions as constructs by man to manipulate man, why wouldn't we look at mass media the same way, especially when it's made by the same people or represents the same interests? Worldview monopoly. Isn't that what religion's about? What's God going to say to Zach Hubbard when God's like, yeah, I showed you all the signs and you used it to help people win at rigged sports, winning money with gematria. And even that, everything that Zach Hubbard does is based on the sharpshooter fallacy. Yeah, the Penguin show's already out. I just checked it out last night. It's rather good. And if I didn't know, if someone didn't tell me that the Penguin is played by Colin Farrell, I wouldn't have known. I would have thought that they just found some individual that just looked the part. But I find him to be a very sympathetic character. I think he's one of these, like kind of like Joker, you know, these anti-heroes. He's relatable. So again, I'm watching Bad Monkey for predictive programming, and I'm pretty sure there's a connection there with the Voodoo. I'm on episode 6. And I'll bring it up today. I have a link. There are some people from the community there that are finally pushing back against the claims that Haitian Voodoo involves being mean to animals or cats. The only instance I can find of magic practitioners being mad to cats, and I have found a couple of things. One, there was a story that at the Abbey of Thelema, somebody died from drinking the blood of a cat, which is like, okay, well, kind of deserve it. But anyway, I've looked into the theory and practice of magic all around, and the animal sacrifice thing is largely a creation of Hollywood. And if you read the texts of even the Satanists, I'm talking Anton LaVey, the guy whose witch, Susan Atkins, supposedly killed the pregnant Sharon Tate. If you look into their work, they're all about dispelling the concept that there's any sort of usefulness in killing animals. In fact, they seem to elevate animals above man. They're very misanthropic. And there is a chapter in the Satanic Bible about human sacrifice, but it's being like satirical on the choice of human sacrifice. And it doesn't, in fact, what he says is that there's no, that magic isn't powered by death of other beings or anything like that, but rather it's the individual will that would be responsible for any effects. I also checked out Furiosa because I think there's a huge push to present these strong female leader archetypes all over the place in every single show. We've been talking about this Kamala Harris archetype in Civil War. Yeah, Kamala Harris kills Trump in Civil War. And then J.D. Vance is out there saying that if they win, the left is going to have some kind of violent insurrection. What's up, Marcel? Good night from the Netherlands. We'll be live in like an hour. I've been able to get the funds for the minimum order on the tabloid. Largely through art sales. I'm still somewhat cutting it close, but I have a few days. I'm going to order on Monday. We'll have them by Thursday. And then as soon as I have them in hand, I'll open up the store again. The people who've already pre-ordered will be prioritized, but I'll make everyone aware of it when it's ready. I'm already writing number 2. In fact, I was doing one of the comic strips. I was going to do that live. I have a comic strip. I started it last year, and I've been developing it for a while. It's called Lie World. And I wanted it to be sort of like Dilbert in a way. It has this conspiracy theorist with the tinfoil pyramidal cap, always staring into his black mirror. And then he's got his cat. And one of the ideas is that he's got toxoplasmosis and he's going a little crazy, but he's an auto believer in every single conspiracy theory. So it's based on, pretty much real people. But the one I'm working on now, he's outside wearing his tinfoil hat and a mask. And in the background is a 5G tower and the sky is gridded with chemtrails. And in front of him is another individual with a mask who's wearing a helmet. And they're just having a conversation as you would on a street corner, like, what's the tinfoil hat and the mask for? What's the helmet and mask for? So the helmet guy's wearing his helmet for space junk and the mask is for COVID. The other guy's mask is for chemtrails and the tinfoil hat is for the 5G towers. So they're just comparing fears. And then the final frame I'm working on has the one individual with a double masking. You'll see the pictures. Constance says, you think you get blowback from a painting of Haitians eating penguins? I don't think there are any penguins in Haiti. And do you remember last year, it was all about cannibals? And that was all debunked. The guy Barbecue, who was wearing like some Masonic pendant, by the way. The gang leader Barbecue. Nobody's talking about that anymore. It was a similar panic, though. So they've been hitting the right with xenophobe psyops, like making them afraid of aliens and illegal aliens at the same time. And I point this out because it's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that they're pushing the fear that aliens are demons while they're demonizing illegal aliens. If you think about how this stuff is all processed subconsciously, we're talking about meme warfare. Beyond just ideological warfare and principled arguments, we're talking about manipulation of perception management, creating negative associations. And this has been a very consistent theme I've noticed. I'm like, okay, he's taking xenophobia to a whole new level, or they're mashing these concepts together by design, which is what I think. Creating like meme constructs. I used the wrong water bottle. You can't tell. There's creatine in the water. How to fix that. Can I make a strip about Chaz? That's a good idea. Chaz was wonderful. That was very entertaining. If you missed Chaz, it was the chop, the Chaz, the autonomous zone. You know, there ought to be a whole sitcom. Like I mean, really, like a whole sitcom, like a whole season, a season in Chaz, because that place was just incredible. It was like a study. Like it reminded me of Lord of the Rings. No, I'm sorry, Lord of the Flies. I mean, you know, where these school kids are stranded on an island, no rules, and then eventually they just become cannibals. Like that's what we were seeing with Chaz. I was like, let's see what happens if you put a bunch of leftists in a closed system, put some walls up, and don't let law enforcement in. What will happen? And you know, the obvious happened. People died. There was a lot of displays, you know, attempts to like show off their better way of doing things. And they had this garden, so they're going to grow their own food. But it was segregated. It was segregated. Like it was basically, they had a fence around it, and it was only for blacks, indigenous, people of color. Then they took the fence down because they said that was speciesist. They said, well, that's like, what if a cow wants to walk in? The fence is going to discriminate against them. So they got rid of the fence. And then the whole thing was destroyed when some mental case with a broomstick was doing martial arts training in the middle of the garden, swinging this like mop stick around, like a mop handle, like that Ninja Turtle, I think Donatello, the guy with the bow staff. And he trampled on all the crops, and then Chaz didn't have any food. And I think they resorted to cannibalism at that point. No, the whole thing got shut down when they started killing people. But yeah, we'll definitely make a strip about Chaz. And I'm putting Lie World in the Insider. And it's not all that detailed. I mean, the artwork, it's based on the unicursal designs I've been using. All right, I'm just graying out the background, and then once this dries, I'll do some white highlights where appropriate on these pulled bits of black ink on the bottom. They need to have highlights. Is Haiti really as bad as they say? I've only seen one video that looked like it was cannibalism. But I don't trust it still. Marcel says, if all electronics stopped working with power failure, most people would start eating each other within a few days. Some people can't even cook for whatever reason. Pretty sad. It's like the power goes out. I don't know. I kind of don't think so. There's a pretty decent book on it that has a lot of anecdotes. It's called Contingency Cannibalism. In fact, the author of that book advises against storing your own food. He says if you store your own food, you're just going to be a target. You're going to get looted anyway. He said your best chance of survival is to adopt cannibalism early and form a gang. And if anybody tries to stop you, consider it free meat delivery. It's a pretty brutal book, Contingency Cannibalism. Piano Andente asks, am I visible in the chat? Nobody can see you. There's your wrench. Now you're unbannable. That's one advantage to having a wrench. You cannot be banned. You can say whatever you want. But yeah, we're gonna be live here in a minute. I'm just running some errands, and then we're gonna be at the studio. everything is so recycled. I'm not going to say it's boring. We live in interesting times, but every Illuminati playing card in play right now has already been played before. I was thinking about making Penguinati playing cards, you know, kind of like our own version of that. Sean Hamer says, I've always been interested in how similar the words cannabis and cannibal are. Yeah, I've heard different versions of where it comes from. Like, one of them I heard was it Canaanite and Baal? Cannibal? I'll have to look at the roots of cannabis, but that is kind of interesting. The ghoul in Fallout mentioned eating ass jerky. Oh, neighbor's ass jerky. Yeah, that ghoul. I just finished season 1, and season 1 of Christopher Nolan's Fallout, and again, this is a PSA. Fallout's a PSA, so the public knows what Fallout is, so they can all react appropriately when it's faked. Fly Me to the Moon is a PSA. Yeah, we faked the moon landing, but we're going to tell you in a rom-com so you don't get mad at us. But that movie Fallout, or the series, season 1 ends with this view of what looks to be Las Vegas after a nuke, and it has a space needle there. See, the cabal means secret. Like, I was told by a certain cult that cabal, you take away the vowels, that Kabbalah with a Q, Q-B-L, that it means mouth to ear, like referring to secrecy. And I was thinking about that image of George Bush on 9/11 where they're whispering in his ear. And the same photographer photographed, this Douglas Mill, photographed the bullet whizzing by Trump's ear. And this all references thine ears shall bleed and these other various, like the Atlantic article that had his ear clipped. But I think that's all a reference. The ear is a highly significant element in this symbolic play, symbol-filled play. And by the way, Laura Loomer called out the predictive programming in the Atlantic, and she called it out on Time magazine. Laura Loomer stormed the stage during the play Julius Caesar in 2017, where they assassinate Trump. She actually interrupted it and said, do you want Trump to be assassinated? So Laura Loomer has been kind of ahead of the predictive programming stuff, but misconstruing it as threats from the left. Like Alex Soros is threatening Trump. The media is, so this is where they're guardrailing. So Loomer's a guardrail. You might think she's crazy, she's unhinged, she's losing it. No. She has a very specific role. She's been playing this role for some time. She only plays crazy on TV. I mean, there is a chance that she's entirely misled, gatekept, and fooled and doesn't know how fake all this stuff is, in which case she's a mind war casualty and it's kind of pathetic. But I don't think that they would have somebody that was a risk that wasn't part of the script that close to Trump in his orbit. And she has been very much, again, connected to the assassination predictive programming since 2017. I just came across that yesterday. I do recall her mentioning it. But again, Julius Caesar, birthday 7/13, Trump's shooting day. Harrison Ford's birthday, and he played the president in Captain America. The trailer was out the day of the assassination, or the day before, but it was basically the same thing that we saw on TV the next day. Kevin Mooring says the real Loomer is locked up in the nut hut. Oh, that's interesting. Like the real one got put away, and the one that we're seeing right now is the timelines match up on that. Now, the DHS is claiming that there's 5 different groups that are after Trump. Alex Jones says the DHS is after Trump, and they're making up this story to deflect from themselves. Anybody treating the Trump event as real and the threat against him as real are one of 2 types. They're in the know and they're deceivers, or they're not in the know and they're duped. So you're left with this option when it comes to any big channel. Who am I going to follow, a dupe or a deceiver? Yeah, now the Harlequin thing. So we have Joker 2 and Lady Gaga is in there as the Harlequin. And we found a lot to connect through Margot Robbie and her role in Suicide Squad and Bombshell and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and in Hollywood, based on Hollywood Babylon. What we have found is that the Harlequin character is more than just like a female version of Joker, but there's a lot of Babylon connection to this one as well, which I want to look into later today. Kevin Morris says grifter channels are the best. Yeah, I've been seeing this new thing where you have a lot of these, I call them LARPers, I guess. Like they're people who go off the grid, but they don't get off Instagram. Like if you're off the grid, you should be off TikTok. Like, look at me, I'm off the grid, guys. I made it. I escaped the New World Order. I have chickens and goats. Got to milk cows. Like, that's cool and everything, but I don't want to wake up and milk cows. And if you're milking cows because you're off the grid, because you think the grid is run by the deep state, you're not off the grid. You're still mentally on it. But I saw this expression, off the grift, that the LARPers who pretend to be off the grid, but they never seem to go away, are actually living off the grift. They can't live without their audience. They're not actually self-sufficient in that sense. It's posturing. Kind of like trad wives. You know, they dress up like these 1950s wives, and they want to pretend like they don't want this modern life, but they spend all day long living the modern life of displaying how they live on TikTok. Like, no, if you're going to be a trad wife, you need to get a rotary phone. And, you know, just go back to the very basic stuff. No more email. I mean, really go back to those golden years. You can't cherry pick. MAGA is kind of a hoax. So is progressive utopianism. These are both hoaxes. The idealized utopian future or past, they're both fake. They're both in the box. Bunkers with Wi-Fi. Yeah, exactly. And bunkers were the main theme of Fallout. And, you know, interesting here with Fallout is the people in the bunkers who survive the nuke apocalypse, they're like the rich people who could afford to go in before the big doomsday happened. So they're disconnected from the reality on the ground, and they live in a fictional universe, and they don't know what it's like in the real world, the street level. So they're beneath the world, but it's like they're very much above it. And their emergence to the surface is kind of like a rude awakening, but it represents the leveling of society and the elimination of a privileged class. There's a lot of subtext in it. I'm going to have to watch season 2 when it comes out. But what I got out of season 1, I mean, I barely got into the esoterica, but you have this character who's obviously Kamala Harris. There's a rigged election over a vault. And they zoom in, after a massacre, they clean up and cover up. They zoom in on a foosball character. And the foosball, to me, is just a game. So it symbolizes like perhaps even an election. And the foosball character they zoom in on happens to look exactly like Donald Trump. And it has a spot of blood on the right side of the head. Like, that is so specific. And we were talking about the stuff leading up to 713. Again, that wasn't done by the universe. That wasn't done by a supercomputer or a higher power. No. It's a form of advertising. You see, we're being sold a worldview every second of every day. And all predictive programming does is it's advertising. It's conditioning you. And advertisers know how many times they have to put a message in front of a person before they finally acquiesce that they want it. They're sort of convinced just through brute force mind hacking. It's not even subtle. Leave the world behind is super ham-fisted. The least subtle predictive programming placement I've ever seen. Connor says, all these claims about cyber attacks, poisonings, hackings, interference in elections, which are blamed on Russia, are absurd and pathetic. It doesn't seem appropriate to comment. Yeah, this is not a lament configuration, but that's a good idea, Cupstar. I just asked for a cyborg penguin in a drippy ink style on a black cube. The last thing I have to do is the highlighting, but I was going to do some of the, see, if you look on the original, there's little drops that are just kind of random. Foosball or fool's ball. Hey, I do think that there's something to that. The ball games and ball worship, the god of the earth and the green of the field. One of the first examples of a metascript decode or the pagan underpinnings of mass media spectacles was this breakdown I saw of the Janet Jackson wardrobe malfunction at the Super Bowl halftime show. And someone had explained to me how this overlapped with Candlemas, Imbolc, which means in milk, and it refers to the weaning of the sun god, who's born in December. So you have the representative of the goddess Bridget, Janet Jackson, and then she flashes her breast and she has a piercing on it of the sun. And this is all about sun worship, the sun, the S-O-N, and the sun. These things are combined. And Justin Timberlake with his blonde hair would have been a representation of the sun god. So when he ripped her dress off and exposed the breast, it was a reference to Imbolc, the weaning of the sun god. And it was in a green field on the first or second Sunday of February. 1st of February, and that is the date of Candlemas. I've also seen Candlemas, the ceremony described as being observed in certain churches where the arched doorway opens to the south and the sun reaches the altar at that part of the year. So we're looking at solar myths, personifications of the celestial realm and the cycles of nature. But Super Bowl Sunday is 100% a religious ceremony, pagan psychodrama. So we'll be live at like 8:30 p.m. to 11 Mountain Time, taking calls. Elephant Tusk says, have you watched Time, a dystopian future where time left to live in the currency? I remember, I have seen some parts of it. I'll have to check it out again. Where the time to live is a currency. And I think that the god of time, Saturn, Kronos, all these images of this horrible looking deity eating his children, killing his children, it's all just metaphor for the god of night or the lord of darkness, Saturn. It's about the consumption of time from the moment you're born. So you can see images of Kronos eating a child. Or you can look at the image of Saturn with a scythe, harvesting a child, pulling him out of the ground. It's all just symbolizing like the months being devoured. I think there's a statue of this deity with these 12 children that he's eating, and it's the months. I mean, it's grotesque, but it's just symbolic. And I would even argue here that Abraham taking a knife to Isaac is actually a representation of Saturn devouring his child. But everything makes a lot more sense in the realm of symbolism when you look at the role, the observance of time through these various characters, but how it's basically the sun versus Saturn, like Luke versus Darth. There's this eternal struggle between light and dark, and the light of day, sun, but the darkness of night is brought by Saturn. So Saturn is seen as sort of like a dark sun. And the Death Star, Darth Vader is a archetype representing Saturn. And even within his craft, you have within the Death Star, I think they're like hexagonal tunnels. But the Death Star looks 100% like it was modeled off of Saturn's moon, Mimas. So then when you see Luke and Darth fighting it out, their swords make the cross a few times, and then Luke has his sword hand cut off. Well, what is the light? Light means life. Darkness, death. Lightsaber is a life saber. So you could correlate this with the myth of Osiris being dismembered when his member is cut off, his lightsaber, his life-giving member. So when Luke's sword hand is chopped off, it's Osiris being castrated. And then he falls and he hangs from a cross in Cloud City. And then he's rescued, and they they give him a new hand. So he's resurrected. But that's an example of the astro-theological myth and one of its primary stories being told to the masses or presented to us in the form of entertainment. I've seen this interesting take on baseball suggesting that the pitcher represents the demiurge. And they said it was, I don't know if this is true, that it's like 66 feet and 6 inches from the home plate, but that the game represents traversing the material realm, trying to, I guess, defeat the demiurge or transcend the matrix, but it has some kind of Gnostic underpinnings. Marcel says, I watched the movie Blink twice. Interesting, dark, and good. Fits into a lot of worldly things. Yeah, I've been told to watch it. I might just go check it out now. Or tonight, later. I try to keep up on my predictive programming. And I saw it, but it didn't register at the time. I watched Beetlejuice, and I missed the opportunity to photograph Donald Trump with a bullet wound in the right of his head in the underworld, waiting in line. And then this is also interesting. Joker 2, Beetlejuice 2, second shooter. So we have 3 of these archetypes of the chaos agent, but it's all in pairs. It's the second, the second, the second. So I'm looking forward to 10-4, and I don't think this is necessarily the case, but it could be. JL has picked up on, and we've noticed a lot of symbolism connecting 8-4 with this Trump head wound narrative. I can find you many 4-8s, 8-4s, season 4, season 8s of various movies that, like Assassination Run, season 4, episode 8 of The Boys had to be changed. They changed the name because it had the character of the Homelander with blood on his face when an assassination happened near him. And it was, at the same time, that movie, the scene is out, they're comparing it to Trump's face, so they change it. So it's like, even at that level, people can't deny that we're seeing these alignments. So I'm looking at 10-4, and Joker coming out is like, well, there might be something to it, because the 4-8-8-4 thing has been so big. Even with like on 4.8, you had the 4.8 magnitude or mag earthquake at Trump's golf course. So we've been looking at this. Well, 10.4 is kind of an 8.4, if you think about it. You know, October 8, like the old calendar. So you're kind of looking at it as, I'm looking at this as, well, this could possibly be a day. This could be the day that they do the real wound. And we know this is a big thing. Donald Pleasant from Newsbenders, who's Dr. Evil with the eye wound, who's president during World War III in Escape from New York. You know, I'm looking at some of these actors who are involved in this meta-scripted story, and yeah, the name Donald, president, eye wound, it's all there. It's definitely coming. The ear wound wasn't it. I was like, oh no, did they just do a lower budget version of what we've been waiting for? But no, it's still coming. Ooh, nice. Mel Gibson's working on a sequel to Passion of the Christ. Passion of the Christ, Jim Caviezel, 33 years old, plays Jesus, and during the 5th take of the Sermon on the Mount, he's struck by lightning and he dies. And then they resurrect him. If you want to believe that. He also played the Count of Monte Cristo, who was 33 when he escapes his dungeon. And I would consider that to be the proto-Batman, which is also significant here. When you look at Jim Caviezel, Q, Sound of Freedom, his association with Trump, the Q movement, and how Batman wraps into that side of the political spectrum's predictive programming. So he played a Batman-esque character. Cubstar says the ear wound was the trailer for the summer blockbuster. Well, last night we were discussing, oh yeah, Count of Monte Cristo is V's favorite film in V for Vendetta. Yeah, very similar. The masked vigilante hero type. But someone had pointed this out last night because we were talking about these various martyrs for the BLM and how the name Tyre or Tyre, Tyre, is always in there. Like Terry in Rebel Ridge, whose movie predicted by days Tyreek Hill, and how the character played by Terry was going to be played by a guy from they cloned Tyrone, Terry, Tyreek. So we're talking about this. So I'm doing some research on Hiram Abiff and how he had 3 injuries, and it's all allegory. So the Masonic myth, the death, resurrection, and the 3rd degree, it's all allegorical injuries. So he's injured in the neck, symbolizes one thing, the heart something else, the head something else. So with Trump, though, we were like, well, we saw the ear wound. So the ear wound could obviously mean something significant, the significance of the ear. And I pointed this out then, Julius Caesar, lend me your ears. There was some kind of reference to ears. The ear with the bullet going right by it, Bush having something whispered into his ear. And then the eye wound would be something else. So you got the voice, and you got sight, like speak no evil, see no evil, hear no evil, that kind of thing. So there's something going on here with these injuries. These are all allegorical. So I'm like, well, the ear thing came true. We're waiting for the eye thing. And in Tucson, 20 people behind him went blind. So what's next? The eye wound. But what about the mouth? And I think they already did that. I think 2020, when they began the censorship and they put a mask on him, and then they censored him on social media. I thought that was symbolically taking his voice, his mouth. So it seems like these wounds are allegorical. So the reason they hit his ear wasn't expedience or it was cheap or they couldn't do the whole head wound thing, but there's some sort of symbolic connotation. He's Hiram Abiff Tannen. Elephant Tusk says, Tim, did you link the Lord of the Rings based on Saturn? 3 finger rings exist to harness the power of Saturn, demiurge for godlike power. I had not. I mean, I've seen that connection before, and it's probably there. The Two Towers. I'll have to reread. I read those books when I was a kid, but I'm certain that there's predictive programming value in there. Kevin Morning says, Cat Williams and cats are connected. Cat told you about the... Yeah. He talked about Puff Daddy first. And, you know, he talked about childless cat ladies before he started talking about Haitian cat eaters. It's like these are meme wizards, or there's meme wizardry going on. They're putting ideas and concepts out there. And this is certainly true. We're not looking at coincidences, nor are we looking at inexplicable synchronicity. We're looking at concerted messaging conveyed through a monolithic media that is only fragmented and decentralized at a very surface level. Sean Hamer says, anyone seen the vid Freemason Explains the Black Sun? I've seen that. I like that. It's very interesting. Although in the Masonic Lodge I went to, they had these two pillars. One on the left had a globe on it, and the other one had the celestial globe. Although you could take from various perspectives here, like third degree, they talk about the 47th problem of Euclid. So the number 47 actually is really tied in with the death resurrection ceremony. But it does describe everyone being on the level and Euclidean geometry and the plane of existence. But the idea of the universe being like flat is pretty much accepted. Now you can debate the world, but the universe is, as they concede, flat. The universe is not a big ball. One of my favorite dumb arguments I hear is, why would the Earth be flat if every other single planet is a perfect sphere? Yeah, it's true. Every planet, every exoplanet, they're always perfect spheres. You never see an oblate spheroid in space. But the Earth is not a perfect sphere. It's an oblate spheroid. Yeah, so the martyr cult, you're absolutely right. You said Mar and Tyr. Like Trayvon Martin, even the name Trey. Now it's Tray, but Trey be the same, Trey. And it kicked off the BLM, martyr movement. And Jamie Foxx was there at the beginning. And that Jamie Foxx died and resurrected. And he was 55 years old. I watched it on CNN. They talked about he collapsed on set and he came back and they think he died. And then rumors spread that he was cloned. And then he fights those rumors back, and then a movie comes out. They cloned Tyrone, and he's in it. But even then, I had connected the name Tyrone to this bigger narrative. Cubstar says, why would the pool table be flat if all the pool balls are round? Yeah, the globe is an idol. You can believe in it literally or not. It's the globe construct, Gaia, the closed system, the world that's already been explored and measured and everything's known and there's nothing else to know except what is already there within the box itself, is in like we have the model. We have a model that's accepted. That idea that we already have a model and we should just accept it, that's what I'm rejecting. I'm not rejecting the shape of the world or anything like that. I'm rejecting the idea that we've been given a complete and adequately accurate model. We haven't been. The model of the world we're given through the mass media is obviously not the real thing. And it's not reality denialism, denying lies or denying hyperstitions or a model of the world or a version of it that we've been told to believe isn't the same as denying reality. We're just not augmenting. This is the subtractive view. Sean Hamer says, the moon often looks like a reflection similar to the reflection of a light on a glass bowl, except there's no distortion of image with the moon. Yeah, I was really fascinated by Vibes of Cosmos, formerly Sturgio Studios 10. Kind of questionable because he's anonymous and quiet, but he does present this model of the moon as being a projection of the Earth on the sky from below. And the light source is this black sun. And so if you look at it as sort of like the Batman logo, he's got a spotlight with a bat on it, projects on the clouds. Similarly, the moon is a spotlight, and what you're seeing, and it's a plasma phenomenon. The way he describes it is kind of, I don't know. But for the most part, it's a spotlight. The dark areas that we call craters would be land masses. Everything else would be water. And what he has done is he has aligned the known continents with a cluster of craters. And he's gone into some very great detail. But the issue here, or what it suggests, is that if this is true, then the land masses we occupy constitute maybe a quarter of what's there. And it would necessarily then be a bigger plane. There are some inconsistencies with the standard model, though, because it would suggest that there's more land on the globe than what the globe represents. So that's also an interesting kind of, I guess, perhaps explanation for it all. Like, imagine if you had a greedy minority, a small group, a cabal, that wanted to monopolize worldview and all resources and control the multitudes. You don't think they would hide a continent if they could? And I was listening to Joe Rogan talking about how if they could go to the moon, they would, because they would mine it and bring down resources and everybody be rich. And yeah, mining asteroids is not a new idea. Mining the moon, this has been talked about. And it's like, well, they could just, I don't know. There's this kind of idea that there's a monopoly on worldview for the purpose of keeping us in a ring, in a section of a bigger realm. And to me, that makes a lot more sense than saying that NASA is hiding the shape of the world because they're hiding God. They're hiding the dome. They're hiding the biblical model. Like, I don't think we should look at this as religion versus science. And I don't think there's any value in claiming a model at this point. Like, you'd need to do more research, or you'd have to do some exploration. And even beyond that, the people who are hiding the model are obviously very well aware of what it is. Which means you don't need to be Christopher Columbus to debunk the globe. You just need to destroy the deception in the minds of its believers and then let the thing sort itself out. Somebody knows something. A lot of people know a little bit. It's super compartmentalized. And I have a few ideas on how to decompartmentalize large swaths of the population. That's one of our overarching agendas here. Paradigm shock to the system. Even in the Truman Show, they tell you that Sirius controls the moon, says Elephant Tusks. Yeah, they do put a lot of weight on this stuff. And I don't know what it all means, but you can't deny it's a huge part of their bigger agenda. Sirius, the dog star, and the role of the sun and the moon and all this stuff. I don't know. I find some very compelling ideas about it all. G says, there's a guy named Commander Lou. He had Crater Earth, but he was a bit of a rambling kook. Yeah, I knew him. I talked to him for a bit. He went to school with Eddie Murphy and Mike Massissimo, an astronaut. We had a lot of conversations. He doesn't believe that we're in a crater, as in an impact crater, but he does believe that we're in like a region. And I saw something like it on Cowboy Bebop, where they leave the Earth. They leave the planet. It's a large planet, and it has all these smaller, like domed Earth ponds. But Crater Earth, Commander Lou, we never had a falling out, but we never really saw eye to eye either. He's very religious. And not that I'm complaining. I thought it was funny, but I do have, in case I ever need it, I do have a video of that guy threatening to shoot me in the head. And I didn't do anything. I triggered something in him. So I just back off. When somebody gets into that level of, heated rhetoric, I de-escalate. I don't poke the bear. But I save the video. So if I ever need to have him apprehended and I know where he lives, it could be done. Elephant Tusk says, did you see the episode of South Park called Cancelled? The premise is that Earth is one big reality show for beings in the galaxy to laugh at. Yeah, I won't be going on the Commander Lou show. And it's not something you can fix with an apology. Once somebody drops their mask and they show you what they're capable of, you just have to believe them. I could probably goad him. But we have more important things to do. Like, I'm not into trolling people. We're like counter trolls here. The whole world has been trolled. And I kind of like that idea. I do think it's true. I do think that Earth is like what we are experiencing, this area. I think we're in quarantine. I don't know why. I don't know what we did to deserve it. It's like the movie The Village, perhaps, a benign dictatorship. Maybe it's worse out there. Maybe the wider plane is inimical to human survival, dinosaurs, giants, cannibal giants. Maybe the aliens just don't like us. Plain Decoded says, Roman emperors would hold an orb as a symbol of rule over the world. Globus, yeah, I've seen that before. The symbol of the globe is a symbol of domination, and you'd put like terrestrial, you'd put your area, your kingdom on a globe. Yeah, it's definitely a symbol of power and a closed system. But could Earth be a prison planet? I'm of the opinion that NASA's job is to control the inner space, the space between your ears, through worldview warfare, and they want to constrain two things, time and space. So they put you into an end times with climate change and all the various weapons of mass destruction threats, and they reduce the amount of space through restricting travel, restricting or getting you to restrict your own consumption of resources, getting you into a scarcity model, and then possibly even locking you down so you don't want to travel, and then removing all curiosity about it, because if you question the model, of course, you're impugned for it. Why would they lie? One of my favorite questions. Now, when is Tom Cruise going to space? We've been talking about this for some time because we want to see how they do his hair. Are they going to hairspray it so it stands up straight? We're in our third day of debating that one guy about the bulging vein on the astronaut's forehead when he flips upside down. And I found other glitches that shouldn't be there, anomalies they don't want to talk about. They're very sensitive. And I told him, I said, it's very unscientific to get emotional and call names. If you're a scientist or you have a scientific frame of mind, you should be extremely interested in questions that challenge your model. That's the whole premise of science, skepticism. Revising bad theories, supplying better information, improving your model. That's what we've done. We went from the default consumption of media, the half-assed, not paying attention, blue pill reality, into Trutherville, where you're waking up to how bad it all is, to past that. We have a better model. That the alternative model is simply that, and there is a version of things or a way of looking at things that doesn't filter itself through any of these prescribed models, but bases itself on skepticism and a rational parsing of facts without any preconceptions that media is there to inform you. And that's what we've done. We've established and created a different model outside of the alternative truth realm's general way of looking at things, which is wrong. And we've had to make these distinctions. I'm not lining auto-hoaxing behind synchro mystics. If you think that the universe is responsible for clues in The Simpsons about future fake news events, or that God is somehow involved in Netflix, they got you. They got you to accept a faulty premise that prevents you from recognizing the world stage as a model, as a construct, and leading you into simulation theory. That's such a major deception. If you think that we're in a simulation because you saw it on TV, it means you're misunderstanding what you saw on TV. And it's all by design. Okay, I have to let this dry, and then I'll do the remaining details. And I am going to be live tonight within the hour. So thanks everyone for joining. I spent more time on this than I expected to. But this is a watercolor based on a drip style ink image I rendered in Bing. I have quite a few highlights to do, but it has to dry first so I can get that contrast. If I put any more white on it now, it's just going to turn gray and muddy. But this should be completed here soon. So we'll be live. Thanks.